What's going on, guys? Obviously, well, not obviously, but I kind of look like Zach, but I'm not. As you can see, the room around me is a lot different than it normally is for these recordings. That's because I am his twin brother, Blaine. I'm sure he's mentioned that a couple of times, and I promise you that Zach's not pulling your leg. Obviously, I have a way different hairstyle than he does, despite everything else looking really, really normal. So we're going to continue this series of the gospel and emotions, and we're focusing on attacking anger today. Gospel and anger. So I want you to think about a time or a situation or anything like that where you've been angry, where you've been upset. I'll give you a moment to think about that. And while you're sort of boiling over that, thinking about that, why do you think that you were upset about it? Looking back on it, obviously this is a situation in the past. What made you upset about it in hindsight? And then on top of that, how do you feel about that situation? And how do you still feel angry looking back on it? What has changed since that point? So I'll go ahead and share mine. About a month ago, I decided to go canoeing with some friends on Red River in Tennessee. It's about a 6-mile canoe trip. And I would say about a third of the way through, well, I guess it's good for context to know that I brought my phone with me. I had my phone with me. It's waterproof, so I didn't have any issue bringing it with me. I was going to listen to music on the water. It's going to be great. And about a third or a fourth of the way through, I lose connection. I lose connection to the phone. I can't play music, which obviously makes sense because I'm out in the boonies. I don't have any internet connection out in the middle of the woods. So I'm just thinking, okay, I'm going to wait until it clears up and I can find a connection again, and then I will go ahead and play some more music. So I put the phone on my lap. It's on my left leg while I'm still canoeing. And as we hit some even water, I'm beginning to look down at my phone, and I'm about to start grabbing it to play some more music, when it slips off my leg and goes into the water. Right. Not good. Very bad. So after some trouble trying to jump out of the boat and trying to grab it, I can't find it. So the worst part of that was the fact that I had to go the other 4 miles of the trip canoeing without a phone, knowing that it's at the bottom of the river somewhere. And I was so upset. I was so mad knowing that I had to buy, another phone. I had to pay off the phone I had now. It was an entire process, and looking back on it, I don't think I should have been as upset, because I think I ruined the trip for some people. If you're watching this and you were on that canoe trip, I'm sorry. Sorry for just being a total jerk the rest of the way. Because, it's frustrating. It's frustrating having to buy something when you're not expecting it and to have an emergency like that pop up. But ultimately, I think I sort of blew it out of proportion, and God was sort of teaching me patience there. But enough about me. If you couldn't tell tonight, like I said, it's about anger. We're going to be in, the book of James, talking about anger and how the gospel sort of connects us with those feelings. So before we start, I ask that you would please pray with me. God, I thank you for this opportunity today. I'm so thankful for your blessings, and I'm thankful for all of the awesome things that you're doing right now. Lord, I pray you would please get me out of the way, and please speak through these students, speak through whoever's listening, and help them to really see how great you are, and how forgiving you are, and how you want us to react when it comes to anger through these passages. God, I thank you for your blessings, and it's in your name I pray. Amen. So like I said, we're going to be in the book of James here, James chapter 1. I'm going to be skipping around a little bit here, so if you want to go ahead and pause this video if you haven't gotten to James yet, maybe like 5 seconds, get there, and then I'll go ahead and start. So, looking at James 1, beginning in verse 2, it says this, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Then jumping down to verse 12. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And going down to 19 through 21. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. So I think when we look at these passages, we can sort of put them in two subcategories of anger. We've got verses 2 through 3, which says, Count it all joy, my brothers, when you face trials. 12 through 15, which says, Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. And I think those two we can sort of connect to anger against objects. Anger against anything that's not going to talk back to you. Whether it's your Wi-Fi acting slow, whether it's a pencil that breaks during class, whether it's video games, you name it. If you've got something that you get angry against that's not going to speak back to you, that's that kind of anger. And the gospel tells us that we need to, the good word, the Bible tells us that we need to be patient and count it joy when those things happen, knowing that we are being grown in faith, that we are becoming better than we were, and we are becoming more like Jesus. So that's one half of it. The other half is obviously 19 through 21, which says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So I think, it's interesting when we look at passages of the Bible and we have a lot of easy applications. We have a lot of applications that we can say, I've got that. I've got that down pat. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't lie. I mean, a lot of those things, I would hope that as you're watching right now, you don't have an urge to kill someone, right? But this is a lot more internal. It's a lot harder to think about what that looks like, to be quick to speak, slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. So I think that, it's interesting. Just take a moment right now, if you will, and think about some ways in your own life to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. I've got a study here. When you're done thinking, when you're done formulating what that might look like, I've got a study here that might help. Mississippi University did a study on how much we retain out of the things that we listen to and the things that we hear throughout any given day. They said as people, we tend to only retain 1/4 of what we hear in a day. Not just in a conversation, not just in an interaction with a slew of people throughout an entire day. So I want to put on our math caps here. Let's put on some math thinking caps and think the more that we listen to, the more we retain, right? If I listen to 100 words of what somebody says throughout a day, which would be weird, would be pretty bad if I did that, because that's very, very little. 100 words is maybe, half a conversation. But just for argument's sake, if I only listen to 100 words of what somebody says, I'm retaining 25 words throughout an entire day. If I'm listening to 1,000 words of what somebody says, of what anybody says throughout a day, I'm retaining 250 words. And that sort of connects us to this big idea that I have from, for this message, for this time that you're watching. If we devoted ourselves to listening, if we decided I'm not going to, put in what I think is valuable in this conversation, I'm not going to contribute what I want to say, but I'm instead going to listen to what you have to say, we eliminate the opportunity for anger. I think that's important when we connect this all together, when we sort of combine it all. Because when we look at being quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, that sort of culminates in an argument. The only times that we use listening, hearing, speaking, and anger, it comes down to an argument. when we get upset with somebody. And our gut reaction, our knee-jerk reaction when somebody says something that we disagree with is to automatically jump on them and tell them why they're wrong, right? If we took the time to totally say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, completely destroy their argument or anything like that. Instead, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. You'd find a lot more. You'd find a lot more about that person, where they're coming from, why they think the way that they do. And that comes into a deeper understanding of that person, sort of compassion for why they think the way they think, even if you think it's still incorrect. Once again, it's so important to, grasp onto this idea. If we devoted ourselves to listening to people rather than attempting to add our opinions, again, we eliminate that opportunity for anger. So again, we're back at these two subcategories now of anger against items and anger against people. If we take the time to be patient and recognize that, we are being grown in faith, and we are being more like Christ with our patience and counting it as joy whenever we have anger against items. That's great. That's half of it. And the other half is that if we devote ourselves to listening when we're angry at somebody and see where they're coming from and recognize their situation, we eliminate the opportunity for anger. I'm sure that Zach has mentioned this before, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen twice as much, at least, than we speak. There's a law firm here in Clarksville that really sticks with me that has this slogan, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And how do we show how much we care to the people of Pembroke, to the people of Todd County, to the people of Christian County, to the people of Kentucky? We listen. We give them our time. We say, I'm going to devote myself to listening. I'm going to show you how much I care. And ultimately, that boils down to the gospel. That boils down to what would Jesus do? Because it's important to see how Jesus responded to anger and how he responded against anger with people. Was Jesus more self-centered or people-oriented? I want you to think about that question for a second. Jesus died for us on the cross. Name one other person that's done that. When we deserved death, when we deserved a horrible punishment for the sins that we have committed, Jesus took our shame, took our sin, and gave it up on the cross. Jesus died for us because he cares for us and he loves us. He loves his people. And there's no better example of being people-oriented than that. And when we look back at being devoted to listening, it really comes down to, are we self-centered or are we people-oriented? And at the end of the day, we need to come back to being people-oriented so that we share the gospel with people, so that people recognize that there's something different about us. That everybody else isn't listening to what I'm saying, but for whatever reason, you're taking the time to do that. Thank you. What's different about you? And ultimately, that opens the door to share the gospel. It's so important for us to listen to others. It's so important to take the time to do that. So, as we come near the end of what I have to say here, I think we really put ourselves in one of two boats. One of those boats is, I've already accepted Christ. And ultimately, that's great. That's awesome. I'm so glad you've done that, but how has your mindset been over the past 5 months with anger? Have you led yourself falling into the temptation of anger? Have you been more self-centered? Or have you been people-oriented? Because ultimately, guys, if we become angry, if we have anger in our hearts, or we allow ourselves to become, just the slightest bit upset, that's sin. And sin leads to death. The wages of sin are death. And I want to reiterate that because the other boat is the people who haven't. The other boat are the people who haven't given their lives to Christ. And if you haven't done that, I'm certain that Romans 10:13 has been mentioned in here. Whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Surrender your life to Christ. Throw away the life of anger and the temptation of anger and the things that have been holding you down. And give away this self-centeredness. And, it's so much better to give than receive. And I can't stress that enough. Giving, receiving, it falls into the conversation. Listening, speaking. Giving, receiving. We're in one of two boats, like I said. We either give our lives to Christ and see Him work among those who are closest to us, and we overcome the sin of anger, or we don't, and we continue to live the way we've been living. The last thing I want to share with you guys, I just want to reiterate this verse. It's a practical application for everything that we've heard tonight. I love this verse. It's James 1:22-25, and it says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing." Let this impact your life. Focus on others, not on yourself. Be patient when you become angry with items. And let the love of Christ be exemplified in your life through these actions. Let's attack sin together. If you have any other questions, if you have any concerns about what I said, just contact me, contact Zach, contact Vicky, Pembroke_students on Instagram. Let us know. I'm more than willing to help anyone attack anger, because it is so important that we have a mindset of peace and love. When we are showing Christ. Because if we don't, people will put us under a magnifying glass and recognize that we are hypocritical, that we are going against what the word says. Guys, let's attack anger together. Will you pray with me? God, I thank you for your blessings. I thank you so much for speaking through me, through this video. I pray you would please impact whoever listens to it, and please help them to see how great you are. Lord, help us to be patient and count it all joy when facing different sins and facing anger in our lives. Help us to recognize that that's producing faith and that's growing us to be the people that you want us to be. And when we deal with people, God, please help us to focus on them and eliminate the opportunity for anger so that you may be glorified. God, I pray you would be with us. I pray you would strengthen us, and please keep us safe. I thank you for your blessings, and it's in your name I pray these things. Amen. Thanks, guys.